I haven't told anyone this entire story, as it isn't something I'm comfortable talking to people about face to face, but I feel it's probably something people should know and think about at least. I was deployed to a place called the Triangle of Death in Iraq in a little town called Yusufia. We had been there for about 6 months with a lot of intense fighting, and were set to rotate to southern Iraq in a much less active spot. We were set to be replaced by the 502nd IR, part of the 101st Airborne. They had been a large part of the initial invasion of Iraq against Saddam's forces, but this was 2005 and was a much different war. When you transition units in the military, there's a period where you have to integrate front seat, back seat rides, where you show the incoming unit your current operations. I happened to be at an outpost by one of the 2 remaining bridges across the Euphrates River when this started. We tried to caution them, show them the ropes, but they didn't want to listen to any of us. They just kept saying, "We have a destiny," along with other hyper-aggressive statements. They didn't even seem to see the Iraqis as human beings. They were just like, "We're gonna fuck this place up and fuck 'em. Rape, kill, pillage, and burn. Hoo-ah." Across the street from this particular outpost was an Iraqi guy and his family who owned the small farm around the outpost. They had been really good to us, pointing out IEDs on the roads as well as running and grabbing us food and supplies when we couldn't get any ourselves. For example, our supply truck was destroyed by an IED one time, so all we had were MREs to eat. We talked to the farmer and gave him a shopping list and money, and he bought us food at the local marketplace. He was a great guy and did stuff like that for us all the time. We took the 502nd guys on a foot patrol, and the farmer came out of his house, greeting us as he usually did, making his way towards us. We waved and started talking to him. When he went to shake the hand of one of the 502nd privates, the private just hauled off and punched him in the mouth. Our platoon sergeant immediately restrained him and sent him back to the outpost with my sergeant and I to escort him while he tried to placate the farmer. We took that private to his sergeant, who congratulated him. When our platoon sergeant got back, he tore them a new one, but they didn't seem to care. I wasn't privy to the conversation between my platoon sergeant and his, but it didn't seem to have any impact either. Their attitude persisted until we left to our new location. It turns out, these same people were these guys. They murdered that farmer's family a few months after we left and raped his daughter. As if this wasn't enough, a few months prior to this, I had been injured when my truck rolled over during a firefight. I was the gunner, maybe 200 meters from where the killings took place. I had to be medevaced to Baghdad, where I recovered for a few weeks. When the truck rolled over, I lost my wallet in the dirt out there in what we called Iraqi moon dust, which is powdery silt-type soil you find all over the place. Flash forward a week or 2 after the killings took place, I received a package from Sergeant Green. It's my wallet mailed March 2nd, 2006, the same day as the killings. I recognize that it's highly unlikely it happened just like this, but I can't help but wonder if they found my wallet on their way to commit the murders, or even if they mailed it just before it happened. I'm not a religious person, as I'm an atheist, but I'd like to think that it was perhaps the universe's way of trying to remind them of the front seat, back seat period with our unit, where we had a simple message for them. Treat people with respect and like human beings. It's all they want. I still have the wallet. I've had it since high school, old Calvin Klein leather wallet my sister gave me. It reminds me of the farmer and his family. I can't help but wonder if maybe we had been more focused on getting our message across to that 502nd group, if this could have been avoided completely. Maybe we were in too much of a hurry to leave to a safer territory that we neglected something that might have made a difference. We even had the option to volunteer and stay in Yusufia with the 502nd if we wanted, but I declined. Not out of fear of combat, as I was comfortably numb to it at that point, but because I just wanted to go relax, and I was homesick. It makes me think that I could have made a difference, but I didn't because of something simplistically selfish. It's probably silly to think that, and perhaps a bit cliché, but it's just what I think. I lived in a safe house in the Kabul Green Zone a couple of years ago, working on ISAF HQ, but moving throughout Kabul every day. The street from my compound to ISAF was filled with pedestrian traffic and these kids who would try to sell foreigners whatever trinkets they could. I got to know them since I was there every day. I got them clothes for winter, random snacks from the chow hall, and we played Angry Birds together. They spoke with me, brought me scarves I asked for, and little gifts every once in a while too. They also kept the other peddlers away. One day a kid, 12 to 14 years old, from elsewhere came to the area with a bomb in his backpack. He intended to kill foreigners moving in the area or target one of the compounds. The local kids had noticed him and apparently told him to get lost, and he detonated his bomb. 4 kids were killed along with the bomber and a couple of adults too. A dozen or so injured maybe. I knew each one of the kids. Kushi, a little girl who was learning to skate. Nawab, who in my view of things looked to have a hard crush on one of the other little girls who was killed. Another boy had a brother a year or so older who looked just like him. I saw the one killed and saw the other a week later, trying to sell things again. It freaked me out. I was at the site of the bombing not 30 minutes before I felt it while inside ISAF. Seeing the bodies after was a mistake. I didn't need to be there. I walked by the site every day until I left that base. The night of the attack, I could still smell blood and the damp smell of wet Kabul dust mixed together. Every day I went by, I could see their bodies and the surrounding gore in my head. I've seen the aftermath of VBIEDs in Iraq where hundreds were killed, but something about knowing those faces so well. Kids that would have done well if not born into such a backward shithole. My grandfather was part of the D-Day landings on June 6th, and as a mechanic in the British Army, he had the responsibility of following behind the attacking line pushing through Europe and fixing and salvaging destroyed vehicles along the way. After initially being parachuted into France, this to him seemed like a relatively safer job to do than many others. Anyhow, his most interesting story starts a week or so after the initial landings. His team's responsibilities were to travel to various towns and villages that had been occupied by the Allies and recover vehicles left behind and or that were damaged. This meant assessing a giant map of the battlefield, looking at the current advancement line in order to be able to effectively move to safe areas. After discussing and marking the day's waypoints, my grandfather and his small team, literally 3 other guys in a jeep, set off early one morning. One of their stops was a small French village, I can't remember the name, that had been taken from the Germans 2 days before. Driving towards an Allied-controlled village, they felt rather comfortable and had no fears of any immediate danger. Well, that all changed as a few miles from the village, bullets screamed out of nowhere and started flying over the vehicle. The car skidded to a halt, and the 4 men bailed out and took cover behind a stone wall to the side of the road. But before my grandfather and his team could fire back, the shooting had stopped. A short time passed, and my grandfather was certain of the situation he was in. He was still hiding behind the wall out of fear. Clearly, he had been engaged by the enemy, and was certain he was either going to be held a POW or even killed. Thankfully, this wasn't the case, however. It turns out that the men shooting at his vehicle were not Germans, were in fact British soldiers. They made my grandfather's team aware of who they were, and explained to them that the village they were heading into had been reoccupied during the previous night, and the advancement line had changed since the last time they looked at it. So, my grandfather had been driving straight into a German-occupied village when the soldiers opened fire on them, with the clear intention of stopping them before they drove any further. The men who had shot at my grandfather used their quick thinking and initiative to save him and his team's life. Marine here. I've only shared this with 1, maybe 2 people. We were on patrol with another squad in Ramadi, Iraq. We, the second squad, were about half a mile ahead of our other squad when we heard the deafening rip of an IED. It was close. Too close. Our walkies went off like fireworks. The first squad was hit. They got the radio man. He was alive, but their comm was down. The radio man from my squad and I just started running towards the location of the blast. I'll never forget feeling so alone. My 22-year-old body running as fast as it could, with a 19-year-old radio man in tow. We weren't even looking for threats. We just needed to get to the first squad. It was absolutely terrifying. I just remember, if we're too slow, someone dies. When we finally arrived, the corpsman was already working on first squad's radio man. He was a bloody mess, literally. My radio man was finally able to call in the corps for a med evac. First squad eventually grabbed bloody radio man and dragged him into the nearby courtyard since we were all sitting ducks. Within moments, as we usually did, we took to the roofs. It was better vantage. As med evac came to collect the radio man, boom, secondary IED goes off right where we were caring for him. Movies depict the fog of war, but I remember going numb and slamming my M16A4 on that rooftop. I was mad, sad, and confused all at once. I instantly picked my rifle back up and began to scan the area. I looked southbound through my ACOG and spotted a kid, maybe 11 to 14, and he was holding a phone. Mobile and cordless phones were the triggers of choice for IEDs. Unconsciously, I snapped the safety off and drew every bit of slack out of that trigger. That sear and hammer was one breath away from sending a 5.56mm through that little fucker's chest from 150 yards. I remember gasping for breath and snapping the safety back on. Did this kid pull the trigger? Maybe. Will you kill a kid? No. Is Radio Man alive? Yes. We need to get the fuck out of here. I still hate this story. I served with 2 paragroups in the British Army. I joined up in 2009 and only recently got out on medical discharge. A mortar round had destroyed a lot of nerves in my back. I still have 100% mobility, but I can't feel my lower middle back, so I can't be a paratrooper anymore. I've been out for a while now, and so many people ask me ridiculously stupid questions on a subject they know absolutely nothing about, and I couldn't explain even if I tried. Things like, did you kill anyone? And, did you drive any tanks? And other stupid shit like that. Gets right on my nerves. Ironic. I do have one fairly traumatic story though. My platoon was out on patrol and we were coming across this irrigated field in a loose staggered formation, so we were pretty spread out. If an IED goes off, minimal casualties. So we were walking on this field, and then someone from a well-concealed position opens fire on us, followed by a few more. We all take cover at that point. The Taliban had chosen a terrible place for an ambush. It may be an open field with trees on all sides, but irrigation ditches make great cover. So I set my GPMG up and returned fire with everyone else. Now, this is the only engagement I've fought that could be described as close up. All others were 800 yards plus at least. But this one, while not exactly danger close if we were to call CAS, was still a lot more personal than I would have liked. I'd probably estimate that the whole fight took place within 50 to 100 yards. So, I'm firing. I probably go through about 600 rounds, which is a lot for this type of engagement. And that's all the ammo I carry, plus a 200-round belt carried by another bloke. Now, anyone who hasn't seen actual combat probably thinks it's how it is in the movies, all that tactical shit and everyone as cool as a snowman's bullocks. It's not like that. When you're in a close proximity firefight, everyone pretty much loses their heads. Blokes will shout the most ridiculous things and fire off all their ammo as fast as they possibly can. I still haven't gotten to the horrible bit. I've been writing this for almost half an hour now, and I'm putting it off. We were starting to get the upper hand now, and that's when I saw this young Afghan lad on the edge of the trees. He was firing his AK from the hip, not in cover, and he had no idea what he was doing. He couldn't have been older than 16. And I didn't even hesitate. That's what scares me. I wheeled my GPMG around and fired 2 bursts at him, and he just came apart. Just like that. Red mist. I didn't even think about it until the fight was done. He was the only person I'm sure I hit and killed in my time in the Green Machine. I'm not going to lie and say I wake up sweating and screaming every night, because I don't. But sometimes I'll be sat having a drink or watching TV, and I'll suddenly think about him. I can justify it to myself saying he might have hit one of my mates, but I'm pretty sure I'll never ever forget him. The thing that will stick with me forever is this. Back in 2010, northwest of Sangwan, Afghanistan, I was the corpsman for my group of 4 Marines. We specialized in JTACs, or guys who call in aircraft, and were supporting the Georgian army in creating a new patrol base. We get to the area where the base is going to be built, sand walls for the win, and camp out in our trucks until the bulldozers finish building out the walls and filling up HESCO barriers. Around the second day near noon, we hear an explosion and see in the distance a large smoke cloud. We radio to see if there were any friendly forces near the area, but no coalition forces were near us. We then mount up to go check it out, and as we near the site, we see 2 adult figures running around a van that hit an IED. As we pull up, there's a 6-passenger Afghan van that looks like it hit an IED, and this van was demolished, charred, and the engine was on fire too. As we dismount, the 2 adults run towards us. This freaked us out because we thought they might be insurgents, But our interpreter was there and they told us that they were brothers asking for help because one of the brothers had 4 daughters in the van that hit the IED. We rush to the van and there's still smoke everywhere, but we start pulling on the rear driver door and I can hear one of the daughters still screaming inside. As we pry the door open, we look inside, and I will never forget what I saw. Inside was completely charred. Smoke was still coming out of the van, and in the seats was what remained of the 4 daughters. 3 of the daughters were torn apart by the explosion with limbs and body parts everywhere. The 4th was still holding one of her sister's amputated hands, while her other hand was pressed on her side. The blast had amputated her lower left leg going to her pelvis. She was trying to scream, but she was already losing too much blood, making her lose consciousness. We pulled her out and I got to work trying to stop her from bleeding out, but I could only keep her alive for 15 more minutes. The father and uncle held her hand as she never woke up from losing consciousness. Me and my Marines started collecting the body parts of the other daughters so the father and brother could bury their remains. Their ages were 4, 4, 5, and 6. Fuck Afghanistan. Okay, so this is definitely going to make me out to be an asshole, but it happened, and it's not a story I share to anyone. I was in Iraq for 7 months doing convoy security. We would drive all over the country delivering supplies and personnel wherever we were ordered to. It wasn't uncommon for all the kids of smaller villages to run along roadside asking for muffins or Gatorades or anything they could. At first, we would regularly throw snacks to them. It was cool seeing their smiling faces after they caught a chocolate muffin or a fruit punch Gatorade. We felt like Santa Claus, winning the hearts and minds of the younger generations, ensuring they would never turn to terrorism, winning the war on terror one muffin at a time. But of course, things changed. Another unit had an accident. A couple kids got run over or hurt, basically trying to catch snacks being thrown to them. So our new standard of procedure was not to give out anything whatsoever, in order to keep the kids from grouping around our vehicles as we'd roll around through the towns. This didn't stop them from gathering though, and it almost made them more desperate in their attempts to get anything from us, even asking for waters, which was something they would actively reject when we were throwing snacks at them before. So we're rolling through this city at a painfully slow speed. Reports of IEDs being found nearby, recently coupled with all the civilians who lined the road, made us extra careful not to drive over anything or anyone that would compromise the safety objective of our mission. As I'm scanning the road and people ahead of me, I spot this adorable little Iraqi girl halfway hiding behind her father's leg as she stared at us with her big green eyes. She must have been around 4 or 5. I knew we weren't supposed to give them anything anymore. My heart melted for her, so I handed my gunner a muffin and asked her to toss it to that little girl, and he did. Her father got this huge smile as he gave us a thank you wave, and the little girl, excited that she got the muffin, ran up the road to show another group of kids her snack. This was when this boy, who had to have been at least 12, just shoved the shit out of this little girl and snatches her muffin away. My whole truck was pissed. This little fucker shoving an even smaller girl not even half his size. I was livid as it was a very violent shove, and the little girl exploded into tears as she sat there in the dirt, muffinless. As we continued to roll towards the group of kids, I handed my gunner my piss bottle, a bottle of Gatorade that I would piss into while driving because we couldn't stop for piss breaks while on a mission. I told him to toss it to the same kid. It couldn't have been more perfect. As we got closer to the group, he turned to the trucks with his mouth full of muffin and started motioning for us to throw him something, so we obliged. He greedily ran away from the rest of the group of kids that were trying to wrestle him for the bottle. Being bigger than all of them, it wasn't much of a struggle, so he's jogging away when we see him open the bottle, then take a huge swig from the bottle before spitting it out and throwing the bottle to the floor. As we drove by him, he was still doubled over, spitting up and dry heaving, so we just flipped him off. As an infantryman, I had plenty of bad experiences in Afghanistan. Plenty I haven't told people. However, I've had some very unique and beautiful experiences too. I have never told anyone this story. My platoon was probably a month and a half into our 1-year-long deployment. The area we were responsible for patrolling was remote and poor even for Afghan standards. It would take us probably 2 hours by vehicle to get to our area of operations, the district where we were responsible for patrolling. That was just getting to it, not including the farthest villages in the district we were also responsible for patrolling. Since it would take us so long to get there, we would drive there and then set up shop in this abandoned school for 2 to 3 days and run patrols out of there. One day, we returned from our regular day patrol. We had a couple of hours of downtime before we would set out for our night patrol. It was late afternoon and early evening, and I was sitting outside under the Afghan sun with my body armor on, but no helmet, just taking in the scenery. Looking out over the countryside, I saw 3 girls, probably about 10 to 12 years of age, just frolicking in the field. They were just being young girls. I remember they were dressed in brightly colored dresses and hijabs, one purple and one red. I can't remember the other. They were maybe 150 to 200 meters away. The scene of them playing in this field, with mountains in the background, was a very idyllic setting, so I decided to try and take a photo of them. I had a small case in my body armor with my camera in it. I reached down to take it out and take a photo, but they scurried away. A minute or so later, they returned, so I tried again. Again, they scurry away. This repeats several more times. I remember thinking, damn it, just stay still for a second so I can take a photo. Then I realized, they were watching me. They knew I was going for my camera, and they would scurry away when I went for it. This was before I realized certain culture aversions to having their photos taken, let alone without their permission. It actually turned into a game. I would quickly touch my camera case, and they would scurry away, and then come back giggling. Repeat. Then they started playing like a Simon Says kind of game with me. They would make little motions with their hands, do the raccoon eyes and whatnot. I would mimic them, and then they would look at each other giggling. Eventually, it got dark and they had to leave. I think about those little girls often. It helped me realize the beauty in that country. Despite all the destruction and death, that was their home. This is where their lives would take place. I can't help but wonder what's become of their lives. I can only hope that they have some semblance of peace now.